Hello and welcome to the A&WMA Academy. This is the first episode. My name is Paul Algu. I'm your host today. I'm the chair of the Young Professionals Advisory Council for the Air and Waste Management Association. And the A&WMA Academy is a new digital property we hope will bridge the gap between networking, conferences, and normalcy, especially during this pandemic. COVID-19 is one of the things that spurred us to start the A&WMA Academy. And each episode will be hosted by a different young professional, and it will focus on topics in the environmental field that we feel are important to our membership. And today, our first guest, our premier guest, has to be our association president. Kim Marcus is a partner with ERM in Portland, Oregon. And Kim, welcome on. You're the first guest. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how this year went as far as your term as president?
Thank you, Paul. I'm honored to be the first person on the Academy. This has been an interesting year. I've been in consulting for 46 years now. This has got to be one of the hardest years that we've ever had in terms of consulting. We've been through recessions and not depressions, but lots of challenges. And it's been a very interesting year. I started out as just giving papers at A&WMA meetings periodically, mostly on the section level, not on the chapter. I didn't know there was a chapter at the time. And I've learned the system a little bit better now as president. I did a lot of just giving papers at different conferences. And then I got sort of sucked in by other people, friends who said, it's a great association. You should be part of it. And I've never regretted that in the 25 years or so that I've been associated with Air and Waste Management. It's been great. I've been chapter chair in 2 different chapters, Spokane and Portland. I've been section chair, and now finally the president of the association. It's a great association. There's great people here, super volunteers group, and amazing headquarters staff as well that just help so much. And going back to Paul's original part of the question there about COVID in the year, it's been really tough. I assumed the presidency in January, the end of January of this year. Little did we know that probably 6 weeks later, our lives changed substantially, and everybody's life changed a lot throughout the whole process. Personally and as well as professionally. The association had and lives off of volunteer supported conferences and webinars and symposia, and having those usually face-to-face. And so this was a major change to think about what we're going to do. And our first program, which was going to be in late March, was not very far along, and we ended up having to delay it. And we thought we were going to delay it about 6 months. Now we're going to delay it more like a year or plus. We're not exactly sure when we're going to have it. I think it's going to be in March or April. And that's a conference on wildfires. We had a very successful conference a year and a half ago on wildfires, and it was just super well attended because of all the different fires, mostly associated with climate change and dryness in California. But we're finding that to be a very common theme throughout the United States. There's a lot of very odd weather going on, and that's generating lots of wildfires and crazy climate change, weather conditions. So we had the pivot, and we had to go from face-to-face programming to virtual programming. And that was a super hard decision to make because we weren't sure how we were going to do it. Number one, did we know the technology? Number two, and three, would people come if we had it? And so that's really what we had to try to figure out in the whole process there. And our biggest program, which was the annual conference and exhibition, ACE, that was coming up in June. Well, speakers, people who are going to book rooms, people who are going to attend, people who are going to exhibit or sponsor. They all are asking questions. Are we going to have a face-to-face meeting? And we don't know what's going to happen 6 months down the road or 5 months down the road. We don't know that they're going to shut down the city of San Francisco where we were going to have it. We didn't know any of that stuff. And so one of the things that we decided was that we owe our members and our sponsors and our exhibitors some sort of certainty. And so the certainty was going virtual. And we've taken a lot virtual now. Now, having said that, we don't have as big a membership attendance on the virtual that we would on the face-to-face. Why? Because one of the reasons why you have face-to-face meeting is so that you can shake somebody's hand, you can have a drink with them, you can have dinner with them, you can joke with them, you can laugh with them spontaneously, you can look them face-to-face, you can, do a multitude of different things. You can't do that when you're virtual very well. Although Paul did a great job of having 4 days of YP events at the end of each day during the annual conference and exhibition at ACE. So that was super fun to do. Not quite as fun as if we were in person, but pretty fun and very distracting. So it's been a hard year where we've had to put off lots of different things, and now we're, the numbers are climbing again. This is, mid-November, and between flu season and COVID season, which is a much longer season, we're thinking about, okay, are we going to do more things virtual now? So that's where we are, kind of, Paul. You want me to go into more detail? I will, but it's been a very challenging year. We've been pretty successful, all told, because one of the things we didn't realize is that we're going to be pretty close income-wise, because we need to have the income so that we can have the great headquarters staff. We can put on great programming. But one of the things we didn't realize is that we're not paying for hotels. And that was one of the best things that we were able to do, was to negotiate. Stephanie Glyptis was able to negotiate it out of most of the hotel deals, because hotels aren't open. They can't charge you a penalty clause if they aren't open. So we were able to escape those sorts of liabilities. But it's been a challenge, and it will continue to be a challenge. Perhaps it will get better with vaccines, but there's a whole new world coming in the next year. So
yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty, and I do want to thank you for the compliment for the program and for ACE. I feel like the entire world was that Friends episode where they're trying to get the couch in the apartment. They're like, and hopefully we see some really good advances, and we're able to shut the virus down, so we can get to our next annual conference and exhibition, which will be in Orlando in June of 2021. So for those of you who are not familiar with how the A&WMA presidency works, you're actually elected to a 3-year term. President-elect, president, and then next year you will be serving as past president. Do you have any advice for Brian Bunger going into 2021? This is probably the most unique year that the Air and Waste Management Association has ever had, and that's saying a lot, seeing that it's been around for 115 years now. So do you have any advice for Brian going into 2021?
Well, I do. But one of the nice things is every 2 weeks rather, we have a conference call between Brian and Stephanie and I. And so we'll just sit and we'll chat for a half hour about things. Usually it's me talking to them, but certainly I'm listening to them as well with their responses. But it starts 3 years ago, I guess. I was a member, like Paul was, of the board of directors, and then I went to the executive team. There's an executive team, which is a smaller group of, I think, 7 or 8 people, and I was treasurer at one point in time. So I got to know all of those sort of roles in there, and then I was gone for a year. And that gone for a year was because you time out. If you're not president, you time out. There's lots of other things to do in the world. But what it didn't give me was an idea of how the budget is created as much for the following year. I had, as treasurer, I knew the budget. Well, and then, so when I became president-elect, the first of the terms that Paul used, you're there for a year, but I don't know what the budget's all about. And so that was a little bit of a challenge. And then I don't know all the systems about how they do everything. Michelle Garing, who was the past president, or is the past president now, was super helpful in, giving me documents and let me figure out things. And we did a lot of work in Quebec to do that, which was where we had the last ACE. And the challenge was, so Brian has been, though, on every phone call and every planning session we have. So he is up and running. And the last, so this week, these last couple of weeks, we're doing the budgets for next year. And so we're always having these dynamic, very active, very thoughtful conversations about budgets and where we're going to go and how we're going to get there. And one of the things that we don't have is as much certainty at this point in time with where COVID is going. So our budgets all have to reflect where we think things are going to be starting next year. We normally have a couple of conferences early on in the first quarter. Then we have more in the mid-quarter, and that's where ACE is. Then there's a gap because everybody's sort of tired after the ACE program, and then it gets very robust in the fourth quarter. And so what we're trying to do now is not stack everything up like we did this year towards the end. Tomorrow we have Mega. That's a great conference. It's going to be a 2-day conference. We have several other programs between now and the end of the year. But we want things to be throughout the year, not just stack them all up as we figured it out. Now that we've had some track record here and we understand how we can work with technology has been a two-sided, well, the COVID has been a two-sided problem. One side is that it really hurts our face-to-face timing. The other side is something that we've learned much more about technology. People are much more familiar with it. People are much more used to using the technology and to link out on the technology. So Brian has been there through all of that. And so he's really got some legs under him and he can just keep going with it. And there's a lot more certainty, and he knows what he's doing on this. And he, as the head legal counsel of the Bay Area, AQMD, he's also got great links in a giant state that has a lot of things happening in it.
So I want to take your technology piece and I'm actually going to move on to our next section. The next section is actually career advice to young professionals. And, everything about this year has kind of been different, but people still want to get hired. People are still looking for jobs. Whether you're working from home remotely or you're working at a physical site. So what do you look for in the hiring process?
Well, the first thing is you have to know you need to hire. If you need to hire or not. So we're in the process of hiring a couple of people in our Portland office where I am right now because we just have enough work that we need to hire some people. So one of the things that we look for people is if we know people, if we've met people before, that's obviously a great thing, but that's not the case for everybody. We have ways of meeting people though. We reach out, the YP group meets out to young professionals, reach out to people. We have an environmental challenge that really engages us with a lot of students that are coming out of schools or not a lot of students, but maybe 20 or 40 or 60 in a year. And so we get to meet a lot of different folks that way. The meeting folks is so much better. The other part of it is if you have an internship or something like that, one of the things I'm looking for when we hire somebody is what have you done? What have you been focused on? If it's just studies, well, that's one thing. If it's studies plus maybe some internships, whether they be totally applicable or not. We're not expecting people to be, to come into consulting, or I don't think regulators are expecting people to just walk in the door and be there. nor are industrial sites, and nor are the law firms, obviously. So what they want is they want people who are smart, who can think well, who have got a broad spectrum of interests, but not only interests in sciences or engineering or what it might be, but also in life, because I think that helps you round things out as well. And so then we look at that, and we try to figure out what's the best person for the project. We're very concerned about DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. And so that's something that we strive for as well, and we're getting better at. I can't say that we were good in the past, but we're certainly learned a lot this last year, and we're looking, in those aspects and for those elements as well.
And so what is we've both, I'm kind of mid-career, and you're definitely where you want to be in your career, but what's one thing that you had wished you had done differently at an early stage in your career?
The early stage in your career, nowadays when I see people in the early stages of their career, they start out doing one thing and they kind of do it for a while, and then they kind of morph a little bit. I look at the first few years of your career as like being a freshman in college and not knowing what you want to major in. So, I mean, the best thing to do is to do a lot of different things when you're out there in your career. Just say yes to things. You want me to drill? Yes. You want me to go look for bats? Yes. You want me to, do this and that? Yeah. Teach me all these things. And then what will happen is you'll find something that you like and you get better and better at it. We'll focus on that thing as you get up there, but get yourself a nice base, because that base will come back later in life. And you will know that when somebody says, hey, we got to do a survey on bats, and you go like, oh, I've done those once before, or twice before, so you have some connection about things, because you end up having to manage those things. So going back to Paul's other part of the question, what do you wish you had done differently? And perhaps I wish I had done more traveling. Like, hey, I want to go work in the UK, or I want to work in Colombia, or I want to work in Indonesia for a few years just to see what it's like, and then come back and maybe do something else. I didn't do that. I didn't move a bit. I moved up the coast from California to Seattle, and then back down to Portland. But I've also moved to Spokane, a smaller city as well, getting a little bit of diversity there on the West Coast, which is kind of one set of diversity, but it's not, it's not all over the United States or the world. So that's one thing I wish.
I have to ask, were you the one that did the bat survey, or was that just an anecdote from somebody else in your office?
No, I have done bat surveys before, but I don't know much about them. And I've done cultural resource, units where you dig in the 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. I ended up doing that at a bunch of ferry terminals in Puget Sound. And, is that a bone? Is that a rock? Is that a stick? Luckily there was a person there to ask, but it was super exciting to me, because I know what bat surveys are now. I know what, doing a cultural resource. I'm a geologist, and I'm the first geologist who has been the president of the Air and Waste Management Association. I look at rocks as just large particulate material, and that way I can relate to air people. If it's a volcano, when it's ejected, it's in the air, so.
I have to say, your term as president has rock.
Yeah, thank you. That's bad.
So we'll close out on our one more thing. This is actually how I met Kim. I was a sophomore at LSU, and we've both got our college colors on, Cal and LSU, and I was chosen by the university to represent LSU at the ECI, which is the Enviro Challenge International. And, I spent a lot of time, that was the Detroit one. And, I spent a lot of time, I competed in 3 more after that, finally placing third. This is, I think this is the definition of failing up. I never got in first place, and now I'm hosting a podcast for the whole association. But the ECI is a design competition that was created at the Pacific Northwest section, where Kim helped develop it. and it was successfully moved to the association conference, the big ACE, 2007 in Portland. That's right.
Yes, that was the first place. Yeah, and for international section. Yeah,
International conference. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
So talk a little bit about that first year. ECI has become one of the crown jewels of the ACE. I think a lot of people take interest in it, and it's really become a big thing at the conference. But talk about that first one and moving it from PennWest to the International Association.
Well, I was going to be chair of the PennWest section, and the chair who was there, she said, "Kim, figure out a way to engage students." And so I went back and I was thinking about this a lot. My son had a video game on I can't remember what it was, Atari or something. It was SSX Tricky, about being a skier and about assuming different roles and positions. And I went like, oh. And so from that sort of basis and some other things and the science I've worked on before, I ended up developing the environmental challenge. And that was this, we are now in the 20th year of it. Started out at PennWest in Tacoma in 2000, and so we had 4 or 5 teams. I didn't have judging forms. I didn't have like so many protocols. I'd put together a write-up on the whole thing. I developed role players and judges and all this kind of stuff, and I had super help from some of the people there who participated in it. And from there, it got a little more sophisticated as time went along. I did the first probably 4 or 5 until Steve Rybolt was one of the lead people, and he started that. He took it over and upgraded it, you know, and then one of the things that I focused on was trying to expand it to the association, and that's when it went to, in 2007. It went to Portland because we had the International Association Conference in Portland. So it was a perfect opportunity to do it. We had great participation. People there were just kind of not quite figuring out what all these students were doing. We had 9 teams, I think it was, an average of 2 to 5 people in a team. So you're talking about a number of students, like 40 students were there at this thing. And then it evolved and then 2008 was Detroit, and that's where Paul was there. And so one of the things that we did when I was at those association meetings, I talked to the Florida section, and I talked to the upper Midwest section, and I talked to a lot of the sections, and some of the people now have their own environmental challenge. So PennWest was last week. We just had that environmental challenge. We had 4 teams. We had 14 people on the program. So I got to meet 14 students, which was fantastic. And so there's 6 different sections that do it, and 1 chapter that does it. So we have what we call the Nano Challenge here, and that is we just get students to come up and give a paper for us, and we give them $400 or $500 just to do that, you know. And so upper Midwest and Florida have them. There's one in New England somewhere. And so there's a number of people that actually have the environmental challenge now. And it's a great way of meeting students. I've hired, I think, 4 people it's from meeting them and hearing how they speak, how they hold themselves, how they think about things. And you go, I don't want to hire that person, you know, and generally speaking, that happens, you know. So it's a great way of getting hired because that's where you meet people. That was the whole essence. You know, we're not there to have just this program. We want to educate, you know, and help our students grow and be successful and meet professionals and figure out, you know, is that what they want to do? Is that what they want to be? And connectivity, because, you know, as everybody has always said, my whole career, it's like who you know, who you talk to, and do they know you? And that to me is the importance of environmental challenge.
That's
And you
right.
get to meet some great professors along the way too. So, I mean, that's totally true as well.
You do, and the inclusion of academia into the annual conference has definitely given it a great flavor over the years, and we're looking forward to the new ECI problem, which will be coming out in the new year. We are taking a look at everything as an ECI committee. Both of us are on the ECI committee, and it's going to be a really good problem. So
yeah, we had one this year. It was on microplastics, PFAS, and pharmaceuticals. All these emerging contaminants. That every year or two, there's some big push on new emerging contaminants. 1,4-dioxane was, 5 years ago, 3-4 years ago, sort of thing. Now we're on these microplastics, and we see a lot of information about that. And unfortunately, we're going to be having emerging contaminants for an awful long time, like ever. So thank you, Paul.
all right. Yeah, thank you, Kim. So this has been episode 1 of the A&WMA Academy. We will see you on the next episode.